Say you're asked to simplify this expression here. Now what you've probably been taught to do is something along the lines of this, that you multiply the first by the first by the second by the first, and the second by the second, or something along those lines. In other words, that each item in each bracket gets multiplied by every item in the other bracket. So within this case, you would multiply the 3q by the 2p, 3q by the 4, the 1 by the 2p, and the 1 by the 4. Let me just try and show you how that works. So let me just write this out again. We have the 3q plus 1 and the 2p plus 4. Now, one of the wonderful things about mathematics is that you can take brackets like these, or the contents of these brackets rather, and just treat them as one object. I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's say that this 2p plus 4 is just some block. Now you can give it a name like A or B or something like that. For the moment, I'm just going to call it this block. So you can rewrite this as something a bit more familiar. You would have equals this block thing multiplied by the 3q plus 1. Now if this was just some letter like A or B, or if it was a number like 3 or 4 or whatever, normally what you would do is you would take this number and multiply it by 3q and then multiply it by the 1 as well. So let's just do exactly that. So we get an equals 3q multiplied by this block thing plus 1 also multiplied by this block, or this letter A or B or whatever it is. But let's not forget that this block actually represents some expression. So we actually have 3q multiplied by 2p plus 4, which is what the block represents. And we have a plus 1, again, times the block, which is 2p plus 4. So when you see something like this, we're almost back in this stage here where we have one thing multiplied by a bracket. So we do the same thing here. We have the 3q times the 2p and the 3q times the 4. And over here we have the 1 times 2p and the 1 times the plus 4. So that gets us the 6pq. That's the 2 times the 3 times the p times the q. Then we have the 3q times 4, which gets you 12q. The 3 times the 4 is 12, and then you have the q. And with this next set of multiplications here, we have the 1 times 2p, which is just 2p, and the 1 times 4, which is 4. And we can't do any more cleanup with that, because each term has a unique variable combination to it, or else it's just a constant. So the pq is unique, the q on its own is unique, the p on its own is unique, and the 4 is unique. So this is the simplest form we can write it in. So what we have at the end here is actually just this multiplication thing that we started with. This the 3q times the 2p gets you this 6pq. Then the 3q times the 4 would get you the 12q. The 1 times the 2p gets you this 2p. And the 1 times the 4 here gets you the plus 4. Now the way I would normally do it is I would skip these 3 steps here rather than writing in those blocks. Once you get the hang of it, you can actually just go right to here, that you have the 3q times this bracket and the 1 times this bracket. Now if you're really competent with them, you can just skip pretty much right to this end step, and if there is any cleanup to be done, which we'll see in later examples, then you can do the cleanup at that stage. But I like to, as I say, I like to just go down to this step. As I say though, I like to go down to this step, just so I remember exactly what I'm doing, and I make sure, and it's because I get to see exactly what I'm doing, and it's less likely that I'll forget anything. So let's try another example then. So what I'm going to do is multiply this 2 by this whole bracket, and multiply the minus 5q, don't forget that minus, by, again, just the whole bracket. So I'm going to get 2 times 2 minus 2q, that's this 2 multiplied by this whole bracket, the 2 minus 2q, and then minus 5q, again multiplied by that whole bracket. So that gets so from here we multiply the 2 by the 2 and the 2 by the minus 2q, the minus 5q by 2 and the minus 5q by minus 2q. So we get 2 by 2 is 4, 2 by minus 2q is minus 4q. The minus 5q, again don't forget this minus here, the minus 5q times 2 is minus 10q, and the minus 5q by minus 2q is plus 10q squared. It's minus 5 by minus 2, which is plus 10, and the q by the q is q squared. So now I'm going to rearrange things. So I put my highest power of q first. Then I have minus 10q minus 4q. It's kind of arbitrary which way I put the minus 10 and the minus 4 because they're both the same power of q. I just decided to put the minus 10 first in this case. And lastly we have so we have the minus 10q squared first. Remember, we like to put our highest powers of q first. Then we have minus 10q and minus 4q. It doesn't matter which order I put the minus 10 and the minus 4 in. There isn't a particular convention about that. It's just a personal preference. I like to put the minus 10 first because it's the magnitude of it is bigger. And lastly, we have the plus 4 on the end. So when we clean that up, we get 10q squared minus 14q plus 4. So here's another example where things are a little bit more complicated. This time we have one bracket with 2 terms in it and another bracket with 3 terms in it. But we work exactly the same way as usual. We start by taking this x, the first term in the first bracket, multiplying it by everything in that bracket, and we take the 3 and multiply it by everything in this bracket. So we get the x times 2x squared plus 2x minus 1. That's just this x multiplied by this whole bracket. And we have a plus 3 from the first bracket, and that's multiplied by the 2x squared plus 2x minus 1. So it's the x by each of these terms individually. Again, it doesn't matter that there are 3 terms in here, it just means that the x is multiplied by everything. So now we got the 3 times the 2x squared, 3 times 2x, and 3 times minus 1. So that gets us 2x cubed. Remember, we have an x squared times another x, so that gets x cubed, and the 2 is still there. And we have 2x squared, because we have an x in that is 2x, and that's multiplied by another x, so it's 2x squared, and minus an x, the minus 1 times the x. From this bracket, we have the plus 6x squared, that's the 3 by 2 and the x squared. Then the 3 by 2x is 6x, and the 3 by minus 1 is minus 3. Now again, do a little bit of rearranging first of all, to make it a little bit easier to see what I have. Now again, the first thing I like to do is a bit of rearranging to make it easier to see exactly what I have. So I've got the 2x cubed from there, and I have a 6x squared from there, and a plus 2x squared, keeping my x squareds together. And now I have a plus 6x and a minus x, that's those 2, and a minus 3. And now I can just simplify that by adding, so I have the 2x cubed plus 8x squared plus 5x minus 3. Now in this example I have the 1 minus y times 2y plus y squared minus 4. Again, just taking this first term in the first bracket, the 1, multiplying it by this whole bracket, and then the minus y in the first bracket, multiplying it by the entirety of the second bracket. So I get 1 times 2y plus y squared minus 4, and a minus y times 2y plus y squared minus 4. So I have the 1 multiplied by everything in here, and the minus y multiplied by everything in here. So I have 2y plus y squared minus 4, and a minus 2y squared, that's the minus y times the 2y, and a minus y cubed, and a plus 4y. Now I'm just going to do a bit of rearranging, put minus y cubed first because it's my highest power of y, then a minus 2y squared plus y squared, so that's those 3 gone. Now a plus 4y from there, and a plus 2y from the very beginning, and a minus 4. So that's everything brought down to this next line, and now I can just tidy it up. So I get minus y cubed, minus 2y squared plus y squared is minus y squared. The 4y plus 2y is plus 6y. And lastly the minus 4. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson.